You're at a webinar for a proposed workshop on December 7th that's offered by the Natural Step and Sustainability CoLab and offered through programs that are in the Sustainability CoLab network. So, Chris, you are probably familiar with Green Economy North in Sudbury then, and Darren, I imagine, if I was stewards, I know you're a member of the Regional Sustainability Initiative in Waterloo. Right. And both those programs are in the Sustainability CoLab network, which is 8 programs across the province, all of which are engaging businesses or other organizations in setting and meeting sustainability goals. So to date, those programs have been focused primarily around reductions in greenhouse gases, but some of the programs and businesses in the network are starting to look at more holistic environmental measures, like around waste, water, softer metrics like environmental policy and purchasing policies. So, Darren, you know this as part of the Regional Sustainability Initiative. They've just expanded their program to incorporate more metrics. And I believe Green Economy North in Sudbury is considering looking at waste and water, but right now, as they've recently launched, have a focus on carbon. So with that background of looking a bit beyond greenhouse gas reductions, it's made sense for Sustainability CoLab to start reaching out to other organizations like the Natural Step to talk about what more holistic definitions of sustainability mean. So just to give a bit of an introduction to the Natural Step Canada, they help organizations and individuals make meaningful progress towards sustainability, very aligned with have a vision of a sustainable society in which individuals, communities, businesses, and institutions thrive within nature's limits. So very aligned between what businesses across the CoLab network are striving towards, what the Sustainability CoLab is striving towards, and what the Natural Step is working on. So to date, the Natural Step has been working with the Framework for Strategic Sustainable Development. That's the science-based framework that they use to help forward-thinking organizations accelerate the transition to a sustainable society. So we've had this sense for a while that bringing these two organizations together would offer some very relevant programming to businesses and programs across the Sustainability CoLab network. And this is our first run at offering something specific, which would be this workshop on December 7th. So thanks for coming to the webinar where we could give you a bit of an overview of what we're hoping to offer. So in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Pong, who's a senior facilitator with the Natural Step and one of the leaders for the December 7th workshop, so that he can give you the overview, outcomes, agenda that we're looking at, and we'll have time for discussion and questions as well. Pog, I'll just take a moment to give you some introduction. Pog works with businesses, communities, and other organizations on integrated sustainability planning, delivers workshops and presentations on the theme of sustainability, change, organizational learning, and strategy. And you have a wide array of past and current clients. I picked out a few to highlight: Edmonton Airports, BC Hydro, Hatch Engineering, Moorgard Investments, Halifax Regional Municipalities. They're really spreading across public and private sectors. Pong has a Bachelor of Commerce and a Master's of Science in Environmental Management and Policy, and teaches on sustainability-inspired organizational change and leadership at the BC Institute of Technology. So Pong, I'll hand it over to you here, and feel free to fill in anything that I might have missed in that introduction.
Oh, no, that's great. It's always nice when someone introduces you. It makes me feel better about myself. So, so thank you very much, Laura, to you and to CoLab for hosting this webinar and the opportunity to share some of our work with the Future Fit Business Benchmark with the CoLab network. So we're really proud and honored to have this opportunity and to share the work that we've been up to and to see how we can help and add value to the sustainability journeys of your membership, of both your network members and also your business members. Just quickly before we jump into the webinar, just as a bit of background, the Future Fit Business Benchmark started with a really simple question. And the simple question is, what does a truly sustainable business look like? And it's really a question that should be quite straightforward and really one you think would have been answered given the decades that we've been working on this topic of sustainable business. But when we looked out there, there actually wasn't anything that says, you know what, this is what sustainability is. This is the finish line for business. Therefore, that we have to cross, and therefore that's what we should be shooting for, and you know, using that to help as an aligning force for different initiatives and so on. So with that in mind, we said, well, why don't we, you know, using the science of the natural step framework, or the framework for strategic sustainable development, using that as a basis, can we then articulate a business benchmark that defines the finish line for sustainable business, and that has resulted in the Future Fit Business Benchmark. And it's an ongoing work, and we'll share with you the work that we've kind of done to date. But it's an ongoing journey as well. We can share a little bit with you about sort of future steps as well. So just to introduce who will be at the workshop, is myself, and I won't say anything more about myself. But not with us today, but at the workshop will be Bob Willard. And I imagine Bob doesn't need much of an introduction, but he's a world-renowned author and speaker on the topic of sustainability in business. He's written a book called The Sustainability Advantage, The Business Case for Sustainability, plus other books. And of course, he has a new one coming out that speaks to the ultimate sustainability advantage and sort of ties in the business case for taking bold leadership on sustainability. Whereas, you know, in the past books he's focused on best practice. In his new book, he's talking about required practice, and that will be actually part of the workshop as well. So he'll be joining us for that day. I wanted to mention him in his absence today. He can't join us because he had a previous commitment. So what are we going to cover today? Well, three things really. One is the Future Fit Business Benchmark, so just kind of what it is, a little bit of background and history, and the content. And then the second thing is the workshop itself, just an overview of the agenda, objectives, and various details around it, and then just opening it up for discussion, questions, reactions from yourself that we could help with. Does that sound okay? I can't see your nodding head, so I will take silence as acquiescence. Okay. So what is the Future Fit Business Benchmark? So, you know, before we jump into that, just a bit of context about, you know, why we're all here in this webinar, why we all do the things that we do in our own businesses around sustainability. And just some images I think that are quite startling. So humanity has done some amazing things. This is an image, or two images, one of Shanghai 25 years ago and one of Shanghai today. And clearly, in that 25-year span, there's been some amazing changes that have gone on in Shanghai, and it speaks to the ability of humanity to affect the environment around us. Of course, you know, it isn't always just a good news story. We've done some amazing things, but the bad news is that has oftentimes, with our current kind of business models and systems, led to unintended negative consequences. And they're not always predictable. So this is I don't know if you can guess what this image is. It's kind of a wild image, but anyone want to take a stab at what this is? No? So this is a crow's nest in Tokyo. And because the crows were not able to find enough twigs to build their nest, they started to grab hangers from clotheslines around Tokyo to be able to build their nest, because there simply wasn't enough natural material, which on one hand speaks to the ingenuity of crows that we must admire, but it's also kind of sad that they couldn't find enough twigs essentially to build their nest. Right? So it's not always predictable and intended what the impacts that we have through our development. And it's neither is it desirable. So anyone want to take a stab at what this image is? No? Anyone? So this image is image of a honeycomb in the south of France. And you can imagine the surprise the beekeepers felt when they pulled out the honeycomb and noticed that the honey was blue, and they had this day glow blue color to it. And they were wondering what in the world could be happening, because, you know, they had been, of course, producing honey for many, many years. And what they found out was rather than the bees going out and getting nectar from flowers, they were actually eating waste from an M&M factory a few miles away, and that eating that waste has caused the honey to kind of turn this blue, Dago blue shade. And of course, suffice to say that the whole batch of honey was spoiled because no one wants Dago blue honey. So it's not, development sometimes leads us to unintended, unpredictable, and undesirable consequences. So this is a bit of a disturbing image. I apologize for that, but just another image that speaks to the amount of plastic waste that's going into our oceans. So there's 8 billion tons of plastic waste that go into our oceans every year, which is roughly 1 garbage truck per minute. And at that pace, if we continue at this pace by 2050, by weight, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish. So this kind of speaks again to sometimes the consequences, the impact that we have is not always desirable, although we've done, again, amazing things as a society. And of course, we're not just talking about nature. So this is an image of Beijing. Beijing, although this image looks like it was taken 50 years ago, this was actually taken last year. And you can just kind of get a sense of the air quality in Beijing. And why do we speak about air quality? Well, air quality is the 4th highest risk factor for death around the world, and in 2013 was the cause of 5.5 million premature deaths in adults. So again, it's not just about nature. It has unintended and unpredictable and undesirable consequences for society. This is another image that speaks to this, and in many ways the image speaks for itself. On one side you have, and this is an image from Sao Paulo in Brazil, on one hand you have people living in luxury, literally with swimming pools on their balconies, and then divided by a thin wall on the other side is people living in poverty. And it's a very stark reminder of the disparity that still exists in our world today, although we've created so much as a society. And finally, an image that was taken very recently of people trying to escape and get out of Syria, I guess, escape Syria, and cross the Mediterranean. And there's thousands of people there that had not were able to make the journey, as they were trying to cross in these rickety old boats that were clearly not designed for the amount of people that they're trying to get on them. So there's a strong kind of human cost as well to the way we've, in the way we've prospered. So those are all snapshots and images that kind of punctuate a much broader picture, and the broader picture can be really encompassed by this image. And these are all images of trends that we're seeing around a wide range of different topics, from population to paper consumption to ocean systems, atmospheric CO2, and so on and so forth. And on one hand, it's a good news story, right? On one hand, we've created tremendous economic wealth. We've created a monetary system that allows flows of capital to reach different parts of the world. We're able to have mobility, infrastructure around mobility and communications that allows us to move anywhere in the world and communicate to almost anyone in the world instantly. But on the other hand, it's a bad news story because although we've done those great things, it's come at a cost. It's come at a cost of impacts that, again, are undesirable, unpredictable, related to atmospheric CO2 concentration, which we're all very familiar with, but also around other areas such as ozone depletion and touching on coastal waterways and structures and biochemistry and so on and so forth. So what this has caused us to do as a society is caused us to rethink how we do business and how we value business. And over time, we have done that. Over time, that has kind of, we see a trend towards bringing business, society, and the environment together in a more integrated way. So just as a bit of a walkthrough about how the transitions that have happened and how we think about value. This is, back in the 70s, this was the predominant paradigm. So there's business, we focus on shareholder value. In many ways, business is all that matters. We privatize gains, socialize losses, and environment and society, hey, if we're doing a bit of damage, that's just the cost of doing business, right? It's not really our problem. That, of course, has transitioned into a much more integrated view between business, environment, and society with the concept of creating shared value, right? Not just stakeholder value or shareholder value. We're creating shared value not just for ourselves, but through a broader range of stakeholders. But even in this triple bottom line perspective, there's kind of a notion that business comes first, and negative impacts are justified by doing good elsewhere, right? So we may need to move and relocate a community, but that's okay because we're mining and creating metals and materials that build the world, right? It's okay, So we know that there's a relationship, but we're trying to do our best to mitigate it. But ultimately, we think that we're justifying negative consequences on one hand by positive consequences on the other. And what we're seeing now is a deeper shift into what we call systems value, and where there's a recognition that we're all part of the same system, that the society is an embedded system within the environment, and that business is actually an embedded system within society. And what's good for society, of course, is good for business, and what's good for the environment is good for business, and vice versa. And in this systems value perspective, the thinking is that business reaches and passes a social and environmental break-even point. So not only are we talking about break-even from a financial perspective, right, making a profit, but we're also thinking about a break-even point from a societal and environmental perspective. So how are we adding value? At the very least, doing no harm to society, and ultimately adding value through our business models. And then same with environment. How are we adding value and ultimately not doing harm, and at least not doing harm, to our natural environment. And when we talk about break-even point, that's where we're very have robust systems and concepts around financial break-even points. But when we think about societal and environmental break-even points, that there was a gap, and this is the gap that the Future Fit Business Benchmark is trying to fill. So a Future Fit business is a business that creates value while in no way undermining and ideally increasing the possibility that humans and others will flourish on Earth forever. Right? So it's a small goal. So of course, a very bold goal, but ultimately, from that systems perspective, from an embedded, we see ourselves as embedded within society and the environment that is ultimately necessary for businesses to survive long term. So the break-even point is what the Future Fit Business Benchmark tries to articulate. So from a financial perspective in a business, of course, that's zero, right? Zero profit, zero loss. That's break-even. Ultimately, of course, you want to make a profit. And then from a societal and environmental perspective, that's where the Future Fit Benchmark fills that gap to say, as a business, this is our break-even point for society, and this is our break-even point for the environment, and ultimately we want to be making a profit in both of those perspectives. So what does this allow us to do? Well, it allows us to think about business, the idea of benchmarking and the idea of driving performance in a new way. So traditionally, there are three ways that businesses have benchmarks as a way to encourage and drive performance. One is looking in the past, right? Looking at past company performance and saying, well, if we did this last year, if we want to do a little bit better than last year, that's great. We just want to do better than last year. We want to keep improving over time. And that's nothing wrong with that, but what we need to be cognizant of is that measuring performance relative to the past doesn't tell us where we're going. It just says that we're doing a little bit better, right? It doesn't say, hey, look, ultimately this is where we need to be. We also benchmark to other companies, right? And either to do directly through our own benchmarking schemes or through through sustainability rating schemes. And we ask ourselves, well, if our competitor is doing this, then we should be doing a little bit better than they are, right? And we again, nothing wrong with it, but we need to be cognizant that oftentimes that doesn't tell us what the finish line is. It just allows us to do a little bit less bad than our competition. So three, business often sets shorter-term goals. Say, let's say we have a water goal, and we say, well, we're using this much water now. In 2 years, let's use 5% less, and let's, because that's what we think we can do, and we set that shorter-term goal. Again, nothing wrong with that. But again, we have to be cognizant that measuring progress towards short-term goals is relevant only if they're set in the context of a longer-term plan. So, for example, we work with many companies that set injury targets or death, fatality targets, and they may say, well, let's do 5% less fatalities than last year, for example. But ultimately, that's pretty uninspiring if it isn't within the context of ultimately reaching 0 fatalities as their ultimate target, right? So, arbitrary short-term goals are compelling and make sense if they're set within a broader, longer-term vision or aspiration, intention. And what the Future Fit Business Benchmark allows us to do is define the required break-even point, articulate and define the fish line, to say, well, ultimately, if this is where we need to be future fit, to be able to say that we're breaking even from a societal and environmental and financial perspective. It then sets that benchmark to ask ourselves, okay, well, this is our current performance, and this is the required performance and required practice. This is the gap that we need to fill. And that frames a much different strategic conversation. It's a much more compelling way to engage stakeholders. And it forces us to challenge and innovate our thinking around our products, our business models, and so on and so forth by having those stretch goals, not as a complement to these other types of benchmarking or goal setting concepts. So you can think about this as a North Star. So a North Star in the sense of ultimately, if we're a ship, if the business is a ship, and we're in this ocean, and we're looking for direction about where to go, because we can go in any direction. Future Fit Business Benchmark defines that North Star over the horizon that says, well, this is actually where we should be going. So it gives us that strategic navigation and guidance to help us think about the direction that we should be taking and consider the performance gap to getting there. And then, of course, that inspires strategic conversations, operational conversations, and so on and so forth. So one of the early adopters of the Future Fit Business Benchmark is the Body Shop, and I'll just read through the quote because I think it's quite nice. The Body Shop was a pioneer of the responsible business agenda 40 years ago, but the demands that we as a society are now placing on Earth have reached unprecedented levels, and science tells us that all companies need to do more, but how much more? The Future Fit Business Benchmark has given us the answer in the form of a clear science-based destination to aim for, a North Star by which to guide our journey to true sustainability. And that's from Christopher Davis, the International Director of Corporate Social Responsibility. And a little bit later on, I'll circle back to Body Shop to show you one of the outputs of their engagement with the Future Fit Foundation. So he mentions here, so I just want to highlight, he mentions here a science-based destination, and that's one of the key features of the Future Fit Business Benchmark, is that it's not derived simply through a stakeholder engagement process by asking what do you think. It's actually derived through scientific consensus and basic first principles of sustainability. And this is where, and this, for those of you who are familiar with the natural step, may have seen this before, and this is something we'll dig a little bit deeper into at the workshop. But we wanted to show it because it articulates also the role that the natural step as an organization has played in the development of the Future Fit Business Benchmark, and it speaks to the 4 socio-ecological principles of sustainability, or in others have called it the 4 system conditions. The condition of the system, and the system that we're talking about is society and and the biosphere. What are the conditions that allow that system to run indefinitely, right? In perpetuity? In other words, that allows it to be sustainable. And there's essentially there are 4 principles that articulate conditions that we must meet as a society to be able to say that we're sustainable, and meaning that our social and ecological systems can continue to run. And based on that is how we derive the Future Fit Business Benchmark. And we just share this to sort of highlight and punctuate the scientific basis of the work that we're doing. So on one hand, we start with the system conditions, a science-based definition of how society must operate if it is to become truly sustainable. We map those against environmental and socioeconomic issues we must address if we are transitioning to a sustainable future. Right? So if the system conditions are the basic root causes, then the global challenges are the consequences of undermining or violating those basic conditions. And then, based on those system conditions, we derive business principles that talk about how a company must operate if they are to be part of such a truly sustainable society. Right? Again, if we think about to create systems value, to create to live within those and thrive within those embedded systems. Based on that, we derived a set of future fit goals, so 21 performance thresholds that every company must reach to help and not hinder society's transition towards sustainability. And then given that, a set of key fitness indicators that give guidance in terms of how to measure, manage, and communicate progress towards each of those future fit goals. And of course, we don't do this in isolation. We do this in collaboration and with the support of other organizations to ensure that it's not just another set of indicators to use, that it's actually aligned with, for example, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We work with CoLab and B Corp, so it's aligned with their concept of what a B Corp is and their B Corp assessments and other initiatives such as Global Reporting Initiative and so on and so forth. Again, that we plan to talk a bit more about at the workshop. We just wanted to highlight a little bit about B Corp and B Lab, because we know that the CoLab network is, or many in the CoLab network are pursuing certification as a B Corp. So just to say that we have been working in collaboration with B Lab and Bart Houlihan and his group since the inception of the Future Fit Business Benchmark to inform its development and its and how it can be integrated into their concept of what a benefit corporation is, and then trickling down into the assessment itself. And there is an agreement in principle and a working partnership where the Future Fit Business Benchmark would define ultimate success for a B Corp. So, in other words, in terms of the B Corp assessment, it would be the 200 points, right? That would be the ultimate, score for a benefit corporation. That would be and it would give them the scientific basis to say, well, you know what, we know this is a sustainable company, and 200 would define that because it aligns with the Future Fit Business Benchmark. So, work has been done in terms of gap assessments and reviewing of their assessment and so on. We're not going to go into all that detail today. We can go into that detail at the workshop if desirable, if people are really interested in where that sort of relationship is headed. But having said that, given the alignment, Future Fit is a great tool to use as a catalyst to boost performance. It's a great way to engage senior leaders and other stakeholders in articulating, in sort of thinking through, okay, well, this is the finish line, this is our performance gap. What does that mean for us as a business? And it's a way to, I would say, a catalyst that could help drive performance in the business as such, but also be aligned with, getting a better score on the assessment for those businesses that are doing the assessment every couple of years to receive their certification. So just this is, I think, one of the last slides. a couple of just things to highlight. One is that there's no reporting requirement for the Future Fit Business Benchmark. It's a free tool. It's a science-based tool that anyone can use, and it's used as can be used to inform performance used to enhance performance and get clarity about the performance gap. So through calculating performance against the future fit metrics, identifying performance gaps between today's performance and the ultimate and required performance, prioritizing corrective actions, and executing to close those gaps. And sensitive information stays inside the company. There's no need to report. There's nothing to fill out that goes into a database or anything like that. Having said that, the Future Fit Foundation is working on a process to recognize organizations that are kind of aligning with the Future Fit Business Benchmark, but that's completely optional, and more information can be provided as a later date, as for those that desire to want to publish a score or to receive something for their own purposes. So I said I would circle back to the body shop, and the body shop is one of the first organized businesses in the world to sort of use the Future Fit Business Benchmark to inform their strategic thinking. When the Future Fit Foundation engaged them, they were at a place where they were sort of refreshing their sustainability vision and strategy, and we're really happy to be able to define the Future Fit Business Benchmark, because that was something that they were looking for. They were looking for something that says, well, what is sustainability? What does sustainability mean for a business? And they went through that gap analysis process and ultimately landed on 7 strategic focus areas that guide not just their sustainability strategy, but of course their whole business, their supply chain, their relationships with retailers, customers, and so on and so forth. And I'm not going to go into these in detail now, but just to give you an example that of one of the outputs, I guess, that can be used to engage their stakeholders. So in summary, the Future Fit Business Benchmark equips business leaders with a clear destination to aim for by providing clarity on going beyond best practice towards required practice, what is required of us in a sustainable society. It inspires and highlights true sustainability leadership. It helps make sense of initiatives such as B Corp, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and what it means for business. It offers actionable insight on the nature, size, and performance gaps. And it puts purpose and context to engage, and it excites stakeholders. For example, in the case of the body shop, where they've articulated their 7 strategic areas, of course, that they use to engage all their stakeholders with. So just a quick few more slides on the workshop and objectives, and then we can kind of open it up for conversation and discussion and questions. So the workshop, it's a 1-day workshop. The purpose of the workshop is to support businesses in improving their performance by sharing and applying a leading-edge science-based benchmark that describes what it takes to be fit for the future, which we just talked about. In terms of workshop objectives, a number of things. One is that we'll be talking about the business case for doing this. So there's of course the socio-ecological case. But what is the business case that can be used to engage internal stakeholders around adopting fit for the future business goals? We'll go a little bit deeper into the scientific underpinning. I mentioned earlier the framework for strategic sustainable development and the system conditions of sustainability. We'll be digging a little bit more into that to give people a sense of where this the foundation that this is built upon. We'll look at the 21 goals for the Future Fit Business Benchmark, identify which ones are the most relevant for your particular business to explore, and then perform a health check against, given those goals against your business model, strategy, and operations, sort of like the so what. So we have these goals, this is the gap, well, what does this mean for us? Of course, we won't do that in isolation. We'll be doing that with other businesses that are proactive on the sustainability agenda and can offer insights and advice and guidance and support for each other. And we'll also dig a bit into other complementary tools and sustainable business concepts, and show alignment in how they relate, such as the B Corp assessments, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the Global Reporting Initiative, and others. We can decide together as a group which ones are the ones that we want to explore. So in terms of the workshop agenda, it's Wednesday, December 7th is the date of the workshop. The location is still to be determined, somewhere around the Kitchener-Waterloo area, I think, and maybe Laura can provide a little more guidance around that. In terms of agenda, we just have the overall agenda there. So welcome and check in. We'll dig right into the ultimate business case for future fitness, and Bob Willard will lead us through that. We'll touch on the scientific foundation, make sure people have a sense of what the foundation and that lends credibility to the work that we do. We'll dig into the future fit, the concepts and goals, and then in the afternoon, there'll be an exercise for each business to perform a health check, a self-assessment, then a discussion about implications for business models, strategies, products, and so on. And then we'll wrap up with sort of reconciling and aligning future fit with other concepts of relevance and meaning to the work that you're doing, like again, B Corp, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, GRI, and others. And then time for next steps, work planning as an organization, and also with the support of myself and Bob, and then a wrap up, and then the intention is to end by 4:30. In terms of the application, it's live right now at www.naturalstep.ca, FutureFit or FFBB workshop. Applications close on Monday, November 17th. There is no fee for members of the CoLab network, if I could say that. However, we do request that there's a minimum of 2 participants to enable discussion, and also to be able to help take those concepts and to land them into what makes sense in a relevant way for that business. And and then questions can come to me, and of course we can take questions now. So thank you very much. That's the presentation part of it. I know that was quite a bit of information, but we can stop there and